It's Graham and Fiona not living the dream. Living, I'm not going to say it's a nightmare, but living the travel chaos that is British Airways. We're in the Hilton Terminal 5, just off campus at London Heathrow. And we did manage to book a one-way car rental from London Heathrow to Glasgow. That is going to be about a 450-mile drive. I think it'll take us anywhere between 7.5 and 10 hours to drive, depending on traffic now to Glasgow. So, not the way we plan to start our Monday morning, but the adventure continues. I think is the best way to put it. Let's see how we get on today, getting back to Scotland.
We're starting this episode today at the Hilton Hotel at London Heathrow Terminal 5. As I said at the end of the last episode, this hotel isn't really at London Heathrow, it's probably near to Slough. But I'm not going to complain, guys. We had a decent night's sleep and a good breakfast at the cost of £230. We booked an Uber to take us across to Enterprise Car Rental on site at London Heathrow Airport. And this is where I'm going to begin this episode, bringing you up to speed on how Fiona, Donna, Michael and I got home to Scotland, and subsequently what we've done to recover expenses and seek compensation from British Airways. So as we approach the M25 junction at London Heathrow Terminal 5, we have a 460-mile drive around the M25, 2 or 3 junctions to the M40, up the M40 to Birmingham, across the M42, and then nearly the entire length of the M6 northbound, and finally joining the M74 as we cross the border into Scotland. By the time we then cross the M8 to Glasgow Airport, the sat-nav is saying this journey should take only 6 hours and 20 minutes. Not a chance in hell is that going to happen. I think from hotel to home, this journey took nearly 12 hours. So as we exit the M25 onto the M40, I'm just wondering how to deliver this episode without boring you all to death. But I do want to try and tell the story about how appallingly disgusting British Airways have been, not just to us, but the other passengers that they abandoned that Sunday night. If any of you think I'm being very hard on British Airways, I want to paint a scene for you. Imagine standing in line after your flight has been cancelled, and that line is probably 2 hours long. In front of us was an old lady who had just flown in from the subcontinent. She didn't have access to a credit card, and she certainly didn't have access to a mobile phone. After standing in that queue for nearly 2 hours, British Airways were telling that old lady the same thing they told us, and that was it was up to us to go and find a hotel at our own expense and deal with the cancellation ourselves using the British Airways app. Now, while we do have access to the British Airways app, it was absolutely no use because we started our journey at New York's JFK and we were due to end it in Glasgow. So because our journey was already part completed, the app was absolutely no use at all. So the British Airways staff then insisted we contact their call centre. And yes guys, you guessed it, when you call the British Airways call centre, you get a recorded message in English. Great if you speak English. It's definitely not great if you don't. But the recorded message simply says that they're too busy to take your call and they hang up on you. For Fiona, Donna, Michael and I, this was all just a major inconvenience. However, for some people who didn't have access to the credit cards, driving licenses, etc., it was a much bigger issue, but British Airways didn't care. They had a one-size-fits-all approach to all customer problems, but no staff to help their customers solve those problems. At the point of editing this video, we're back in the UK 4 weeks from that pretty awful Monday driving all the way up through England to Scotland. For those of you who know this road, that you will recognise now that we're just onto the M74 approaching the Scottish border. So as we approach the junction for Gretna Green, I do want to point out that I made a claim to British Airways a few days after we returned home. It then took just over 2 weeks for British Airways to process our claim. and they have already refunded our out-of-pocket expenses. However, they have refused to process our claim for compensation. They are claiming that our flight cancellation was purely down to weather and nothing else, and therefore they have no need to process any compensation. So there you go, guys, we've just crossed the border into Scotland, and everyone in the car is very happy that we're that step near to home. So as I reflect on the actions of British Airways, I am just absolutely disgusted that the management has left this airline in a bare bones state. The storm that caused our flight to be cancelled was something like 6 hours before our flight was due to depart. And as a result, I'm disputing it with British Airways that our flight was cancelled due to weather. I'm arguing that British Airways could have brought in standby staff to operate our service and many of the other services that were cancelled that Sunday night. However, British Airways management have got such an appalling relationship with their staff. They treated them like absolute crap during the pandemic, and as a result, the airline is in a bare bones state, as I've said previously. The staff that we met during our entire trip, from the ground staff at Heathrow to the cabin crew on our services down to London and across to New York, they were all extremely professional. But I know that they're now balloting for strike action, and to be quite frank, I don't blame them. Talking to friends that have used British Airways subsequent to our trip in October 2022, I've heard horror stories of ground maintenance teams arguing with the captain that an aircraft is safe or not safe to fly. So as we approach the city of Glasgow and the end of our mammoth journey from Heathrow to Scotland by road, I would love to say that I could take the decision never to use British Airways again. That's what I would love to say, but in reality, living here in the UK, that is not an option. So as we approach the Glasgow Airport junction on the M8 motorway, the next trip coming up for me is in January when I'm heading out to California. I'm yet to choose which route that I'm going to take out to Sacramento, but I can promise you this, guys, it will not be British Airways. Fiona has also got a trip coming up to Melbourne in Australia. That's in March 2023, and again, she'll not be using British Airways. So that's it, guys. That is our story of being abandoned by British Airways in London Heathrow back in October 22. The airline is a complete disaster. They're not making any money right now, and I understand completely why. Their customer service is absolutely disgusting. It's ridiculous, and I would recommend anyone to avoid British Airways if at all possible. So you're back in our own car? I don't think you're going to see as much as pitch black and as miserable here in Glasgow. It's also cold. And
13 degrees.
13 degrees. Virgin New Yonkers is done. Abandoned by BA is probably not over till we'll get some money back from the sods. But without a doubt, this is where we bring Virgin New Yorkers to a close.
Good trip.
It was a good trip.
Good memories.
But shite journey home. Absolutely horrible journey home. Thank you, British Airways, for being your usual useless selves and being extremely helpful. Not. But anyway, that's it. Over and out. Next trip.
Here's the next one. Fiona going to Australia in 158 days.
Are you going to video that?
I can do some of it for you. No, I mean you would go to some. Fifi's travelling on her own.
Fifi down under?
Fifi down under.
And or will it be Graham on his own?
Fifi goes down under.
Fifi goes down under. Graham survives 3 weeks on his own. Yay! Alright, this is it. Over and out for another trip.
That's all for now, folks.
Good night.